Lights, camera, action.
As someone who worked on a set, you're like still adjusting your hair when you say action. I don't think that's not.
I'm behind. I was behind the camera.
Oh, I see. Got it.
I need hair and makeup.
I'm gonna start again. It's hard. For me because I'm recording my screen. I can't actually read notes. My notes are here on an iPad, so I like it's very easy to like lose track of what I'm saying. So I'm just gonna start again. Welcome back to our video training on developing online community with young people. Firstly, my name is Jonathan Reed, and I'm Director of Programs with Next Gen Men.
And I'm Stephanie Wright, the manager of youth programs and partnerships at Next Gen Men.
And we are missing our colleague Ali, who's a youth program coordinator, and it's contributed immensely to this project. He's not with us for this video, but we're going to hold it down without him. Secondly, this is our session, as you've probably figured out, about safety. I guess I'll recap this from our introductory session in case you didn't watch it. As we figured out how do we do what we do and how do we do it really clearly and effectively, we created a model that we call our systems of care. The systems of care are the different sort of interlocking and overlapping ways that we take care and engage and empower the young people within our community. And this video in particular is about the system of safety. We also connected each system as we came up with this model. We connected each system to one of the 4 core needs identified by a researcher named Martin Brokenleg. This one is connected to the spirit of independence. First of all, for anybody who has worked with young people or raised young people, you know that you've probably witnessed that spirit of independence in all kinds of different ways. From a young age, like little toddlers, are looking to sort of, map out the boundaries and practice their independence. And especially teenagers are again, trying to practice autonomy, have their own ability to make decisions. That is all about that young people, or that inner need to be independent. And independence and safety kind of go hand in hand because you can practice independence within a system where you know you're going to be held with safety and respect. From there, I'm going to jump into why does this specifically matter in an online context. We've touched on a lot of this in our introductory session. If you haven't watched it, that's okay. But we touched on this already. The idea that as an organization that has stewarded online community and relationships with young people for more than 5 years, I guess I'll just say we're aware. It doesn't really feel like enough. We're aware, we're vigilant, we're concerned, but we're aware of the potential for harm, for boys to either experience harm or perpetrate harm online. And that's come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. And it's something that's increasingly accelerating in the last couple of years. But just to name a few examples, again, we touched on this in the previous video, but just to name some examples, extremist radicalization, financial sextortion, gambling, AI companions, AI deepfakes. There's, and the list goes on. There's all kinds of different ways that boys are at the front lines of harm online. So firstly, this is important because boys' well-being matters. But secondly, it's also important because it connects to the normalization of violence against girls and women and people of other genders. Essentially, if you don't feel safe as a boy or as a young man, you're often going to default back to the status quo. And we know the status quo is aggression, objectification, transgressive humor, hyper-competitive, like all those sort of norms and expectations of what is it typically or traditionally look like to be a man. That's the status quo that they're going to default back to in order to project their status, again, as boys or as young men. Essentially, if boys can feel safer in their own well-being, then their behavior, their attitudes and beliefs can more easily take into account the well-being of others because they don't have to be, reactively protecting themselves. They can think about proactively protecting others. So that brings us to the system of safety. We're first and foremost motivated because we have a duty to, our highest priority is the safety and the well-being of the young people within our community. But we're also motivated because we can see that we can sort of connect the dots between how boys feel about themselves and their community and how they're able to think and act towards people who are different.
And that brings us to, how do we maintain safety? How does this all work? And so really, we have three specific areas that we've sort of categorized these into. The first is screening. So really, what safety measures do we have for young people who are coming into the door of NGM Alliance, our online community? The second is our policies. So, what are the rules and norms that govern us and the young people within our space, and our guidelines? And then lastly, our built in safeguards. So, if young people or us as facilitators are in need of support or help, what does that look like? What are built into our space? What is built into our space, sorry, and what does that look like? How have we built those in? So I'll touch on all three of those in a second, but really it's safety for us is paramount. What we're doing is very unique. As far as I'm aware, we're the only youth serving organization to be running a Discord server. And we're nearing like 900,000 messages right now over the last 5 years. And so it's incredibly important, as this community has continued to grow, that we continue to grow and evolve our safety systems and standards, which really we've built sort of from the ground up, which has been quite the process. So I'm happy to sort of jump into a little bit of what that has looked like. One of the biggest questions I get from people in youth serving organizations is, can anybody join? What does this look like? How do you know who people are who are coming in? All these different pieces. So we have our screening process. And what's important to understand is, on Discord, there are sort of different kinds of servers or communities. There are open servers. So these are the ones that have thousands of people in them. They're oftentimes specifically focused on people interested in a specific video game or influencer or streamer. We are not that. We are a closed server. And so what that means is that somebody has to have a link to our server in order to find out about it. And from there, once they have the link, they cannot access the server. They can see a little brief bio about it, but they're linked immediately to our application form. So once they see this application form, this is they're allowed to, apply to join. And so this form quickly asks their name, their birthday, and how they found out about the server. And once they submit this, it gets put into a space that only facilitators can see. And so we have access to all these sort of applications. From there, we move into an interview stage. So facilitators would launch the interview, which is a text-based interview. It's a chat with the facilitators and this person who are wanting to apply. And this is happening outside of the server in a direct message. And from there, our facilitators sort of ask further questions, walk them through the registration process, get to know them a bit more. So there are two parts of this interview stage. The first, and this is all contingent on, them being the right age and that sort of thing. The first thing is filling out the form, the registration form, which is automatically linked to them, and they can automatically fill it out in the interview itself. And that form has basic demographic information. So their name, age, the city that they live closest to. And then we do ask for an emergency contact from a trusted adult in their life. And the reason we do that is because, as youth workers in Canada, but also there's similar requirements in various states, in all states in America, we have a duty to report. And so in order to do that, we have an emergency contact in order to, if we ever have to report something, we have access to sort of move through that process and help a young person and support them in the best way we can. Once that form is filled out, we move into the final stage of the process before a young person can be let in, which is our voice call. And so within this voice call, a facilitator and the young person would jump on the call. And it's really for us to ask more questions, see what they're interested in, why they want to join, learn a bit more about them, all those sorts of things. And so this voice verification piece specifically really is something that we've done throughout the entirety of the time that the server has existed. And I'm really proud to say that this process has never once failed us. We've never had anybody join the server who was not who they said that they were. So we're very proud of that. And I'll pass it over to you, Jonathan, for policies. Very exciting.
Yeah, you just reminded me, before I get started on our sort of internal guidance policies, we also have two policies that as they join the server, young people are introduced to. So I'll touch on that really quickly just to say, first of all, we have a code of conduct. I'm also proud of this code of conduct. It, from day one, all the way back to 2020, has been co-written with young people within our community. And I could not even tell you how many times it's been, updated, but it's a lot. So the code of conduct touches on how I was about to say how we expect young people to act, but it's honestly how they expect each other to show up and to act and to communicate within our community. So they sort of agree to the code of conduct within that that application direct message, and we also introduce them to our privacy policy. Like Stephanie mentioned, we have them fill in a registration form, which means we're collecting information about them, and I guess I'd say companies have a legal duty to, and nonprofit. Well, I'll just say, anybody who connects with young people online has a responsibility to respect their privacy and to maintain the confidentiality of the information that's been shared with them. And we worked with a law firm to write this privacy policy in youth-friendly language, and essentially it helps them understand what information are they sharing with us, what do we do with that information, and also some other details about what might happen and how can they take their information back. One other thing that we've done is record videos of ourselves explaining different elements of the Discord servers so that young people whose eyes glaze over when reading long paragraphs of text can still be caught up to speed. Now we also have policy. Anything on that, Stephanie, before I jump into policies that guide our internal work?
The only thing I would add is that within that registration form that I mentioned, they have to agree to the privacy policy and the code of conduct so that they're agreeing to showing up in the way that we and they expect each other and themselves to show up in our community.
100%. Okay, so we also have developed and again, this is sort of painstaking over years. We've developed policies and specific tools for. I didn't run this by you, Stephanie, but I came up with 3 adjectives. Technically, these are adverbs. 3 adverbs for how we want to respond when working with young people in challenging situations. I said we want to respond efficiently, consistently, and responsibly. I love to have a little triad of adjective, that's very much my style. But those are the 3 adjectives or adverbs that came to mind for me. We want to be efficient. We want to be consistent, and we want to be responsible in terms of how we do that. And so we've developed these specific policies and tools that we use in staff training. We refer back to them so that we can be those 3 things. The first is a confidentiality. So essentially, how do I want to start this? Well, I'll say one of the boys that I worked with years ago messaged me and said, "Hey, could I give your number to a friend of mine?" This kid texted me and said, what did he say? I wrote this down for myself. "Can you talk? I need help bad and I can't talk to anyone about it." And we've seen this over the years. It's academic problems, mental health struggles, depression, suicide ideation, online challenges, friendship challenges, parental abuse. We faced all kinds of different things that young people genuinely need help, and they need to be directed to resources, and sometimes they need somebody to be told what's going on, or they need to tell somebody what's going on. But something that we've experienced, or I've experienced, is that almost always when they're disclosing something that they're struggling with, that disclosure is accompanied by the phrase, "Don't tell anyone." In my early years of working with young people, I was familiarized with the duty to report. If you're not aware of what that is, as youth workers, we have a mandated duty to report, which means if we have reasonable grounds to suspect that a young person is in need of protection, we need to tell what in Canada are children's aid societies about what's going on and what we know. And when I was sort of newer to this work, that was very much presented as a black and white. I'm not an expert on this kind of thing. From my perspective, it's black and white because it's designed to take the burden of decision making off of those frontline workers. It's meant to be like, it's not your decision whether to tell somebody or not. If you have a reasonable grounds to suspect that someone needs protection, you need to tell someone. And that Children's Aid Society will take the responsibility of ensuring the safety and well-being of that young person. That's an important system, and the duty to report is something that we take really seriously. Something that I've experienced over the years is that the lives of children and teenagers especially are not always black and white. Sometimes there's this gray area of, well, I'm worried about what they're doing. Are they in need of protection? Like there is this sort of gray area that does result in some level of decision making, which means that again, if we want to be consistent and responsible in how we think about this kind of thing, we needed a tool to do that. So I already clicked all the way to this and then clicked all the way back because I realized I had a bit of like a precursor to it. But this is our confidentiality flowchart, and it's designed so that when a young person shares something, this will guide us through. First of all, are they in imminent danger? Secondly, is it something that we do have reasonable grounds to make a report? And then it guides us through others, substance use, self-harm, and other things that we might be worried about and thinking about, and then recognizing patterns and increasing risk and that kind of thing. And all those things will help us sort of decide who we tell and how, or what does it look like to support that young person in telling as well. I did that thing where you like feel passionately about something and then you kind of like over explain, but that probably hopefully landed with some degree of clarity. I'll say this, for example, a 14-year-old once talked with me about getting high about once a week. Should a 14-year-old be getting high? Should I tell somebody about the fact that he's getting high? What about if he's starting to get high more often, or he's starting to experiment with other substances? Like, all of those complexities were grounded in my utility of the confidentiality flowchart in terms of helping me decide what to do. Anything to add to again, I feel like I totally just like rambled, but anything to add to the confidentiality flowchart, Stephanie, or am I doing okay?
You're doing great. I would say it's often gray. It's all it like most of the time it's quite gray, right? So having this framework has been so incredibly helpful to orient myself in the right direction and understand like what the best next step is when something happens or a kid discloses something.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I feel like I just spent a lot of time explaining that. So I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker with a couple more policies that we make use of. Secondly, I guess we also have a reporting hierarchy that helps us know where or with whom to share about concerns that we have. And this is particularly useful when a young person is experiencing discomfort from the behavior of a staff member. The hierarchy helps us know who within the Next Gen Men hierarchy or sort of staff organization do we reach out to about that. We have a scope of practice that's meant to visualize what do we do and what don't we. This one's really helpful because we're kind of in a unique relationship with a lot of the young people on our server. We're not quite friends. We're not parents. We're not quite therapists. We're definitely not doctors or lawyers, but they ask us for things that overlap with a lot of these different roles of the relationships that they have in their lives. And the scope of practice then helps us decide, yeah, is that within what we do, or is it outside of the boundaries of the relationships that we are stewarding in this online community. An example of that, because I did think of a couple of examples. So another example is I had a parent who said she was concerned about the amount of screen time that her son was engaging in, and she wanted me to enforce bedtime. We're on Discord in the evenings, and she wanted me to say, it's time to get off, turn it off, go to bed, and that kind of thing. And I this was actually before we developed the scope of practice, and I was like thinking to myself and then talking with my colleagues, like, I think I can back up a parent and say, hey, I think it's worth listening to your parent, and I can promote the idea of like sleep hygiene, or screen time limits. But it's not my job to tell a kid when to get on and off Discord. Like, that's got to be within the parent scope of practice and not within mine. And then lastly, sorry, I feel like I'm explaining this in a really weird way, but lastly, lastly, we have a conflict resolution framework. This is it's relevant because in the work that we do, we're online the majority of the time, maybe. But we don't promise 24/7 supervision, nor could we prevent conflict from happening even if we did. So the online context means that it can be kind of complex to respond to things that happen. Sometimes it's just one sided, right? Like a kid posting something inappropriate. We've got a response sort of pathway for that. Sometimes it's between two of them, sometimes it's between multiple, and sometimes it's really minor and just needs a little bit of a guiding, emoji, or, or sometimes it involves, it's a little bit more significant, and it involves using moderation tools on Discord to de-escalate, like muting someone or timing them out. And sometimes it's a bit of a blow up, and it involves restorative practices to repair the harm that's happened within the community and within the relationship. So there's all these sort of different pathways that we take depending on what happened, with whom it happened, when it happened, and what they might be looking for in terms of what could come next. So all of these frameworks, like I said, are designed to help us respond to challenging situations. What did I say? Efficiently, consistently, and responsibly. And that's us doing our best to take care of the well-being of the young people within our community.
So we have our policies that help govern the youth in the space, and also us as facilitators, and what the expectations are, what's our scope of practice, how do we help, manage conflict in the space. But we also have our built-in safeguards. And so this has been something that's evolved, and we've continued to add things over the years. And really, I think, Jonathan and I both come from an in-person background. Jonathan was a teacher, and I help run outdoor education programming. And this is very unique because, when you have kids in person, there are ways that you can talk to them, you can engage with them, you can ask them to be in a room with you, have a conversation. In our space, it's autonomous, right? Young people can log off or log on or be in online or not whenever they want. And so we've really tried to frame our safeguards to help meet that need, and basically meet any young person where they are, whether that be anonymously or confidentiality wise, or whether they want to talk to us one-on-one, or, tell us about something that's going on. So we're kind of trying to orient ourselves in these different ways. I would say that our two safeguards can be broken down into two separate categories. So the first is facilitator used safeguards, the ones that we use, and then the ones that are used by the young people within our space. The facilitator use safeguards specifically is a channel. So it is a separate text-based chat room, basically, that is only accessible by facilitators. And it's called Flags Log. And Flags Log is a place where if something is brought up by a youth, whether, in one of our other channels with other youth or in a direct message with us, we discuss it as a facilitator team, what happened, what was disclosed, what was the situation, and what our plan of action is. And this is really because one brain is not as good as a bunch of brains together thinking about something. And oftentimes it's a place for us to orient ourselves to say, what do you think the best next step is? I think this is what I should do. What do you think? And this is the place where we talk about all these things. It's also a place where a lot of times our confidentiality flowchart is coming into action, right? Where we're sharing, okay, what resources should we send this kid? What's the next step here? It's also a place where we discuss the best person to follow up. So if follow-up is required based on whatever's gone on, we often talk about who has the strongest relationship to this young person. Because if something was to happen and then somebody who doesn't have as strong of a relationship messages, they might not reply, right? This is the difference between an in-person program and a online environment. And so we want to basically help steward that relationship as much as possible with this young person. And so we want to use the strongest relationship that we have on our facilitator team to make that happen. Moving to the safeguards used by the young people within our space, we have a bunch. So in our server guide, there is a section that says get help. And within this get help section, the first thing that comes up is it says, is this something you're struggling with internally or a challenge that you have internally? and it links to our help resources channel. And so our help resources channel is something that we're really proud of. And it basically outlines a variety of hotlines and resources for our Canadian and American youth to access at any time. So often these are like 24/7 hotlines. They're specific to certain groups of people. So, for example, we have, LGBTQ hotlines, we have hotlines for Black youth, we have hotlines for Muslim youth, et cetera, et cetera. And then also within our help resources section, we have access to free therapy for all of our members across America and Canada. So if for anybody in our server, they can access 6 months of free therapy through our partnership with BetterHelp, which we are very, very, we're very grateful for. And that is virtual. So it really can, this is virtual therapy. So it can help with any of the youth within our space if they choose to do so. And it's completely anonymous. So we don't know who is accessing it, but they're able to access it through a code quite easily. If they are seeking help for something not mental health related or for something that's specifically concerning the server itself, they have a couple options. The first is if they have a concern with a facilitator in the space. Our executive director, Jake's contact info is provided, along with a form, an anonymous reporting form that they can fill out. And that form, the responses to it, go directly to Jake. We, as the facilitator team in the server, do not have access to it. And so if anything ever appears there, Jake follows up in that space. The other option is we have a help now button. And this is if there's a conversation going on in the server that, a young person is like, I would love to have a facilitator help out right now, and I would love for them to assist with. And so they can click on that button and a text message is automatically sent to our phones saying, check the server now. And we do. And we check the server now. And then along with that automatic trigger of a text message, once the button is clicked, it also triggers a message in our flags log space, which I talked about previously, that tells us who clicked that button. So we're able to quickly see where the conversation is and quickly be able to follow up with that young person if necessary. But we've really taken the things that we've learned from in-person programming and tried to translate it into this online environment and making it as accessible and useful as possible for the young people we work with.
Thank you. Amazing. As you were finishing, I was thinking to myself, like, what we want you to know is not do exactly everything that we've done. Although part of the reason we're sharing them is because they're effective. And we have put blood, sweat, and tears into creating these policies, tools, and safeguards. So like they are good, but the takeaway is not necessarily, duplicate. The takeaway is more so like, first of all, be confident that it's possible, right? It is possible to take, like, if you're watching this, you're probably an expert, right? In-person, like program development and safeguarding, like, what that looks like. So be confident that this is possible. We've been doing it for 5 years. And secondly, figure out the elements to your program, to your community, to your structures that, like Stephanie said, that you can translate into that online context. I think it's really important that we do. I at one point heard from a child and youth advocacy center that we were working with that they had heard from one of the law enforcement officers in their community, hey, Discord is completely not safe. You shouldn't be on Discord whatsoever. Young people should not be on Discord. And my response to that was, of course, Discord's not safe, right? It's on the internet. The internet is not an inherently safe place. Do you know what else is inherently unsafe is sidewalks, right? Because they're on the street. But we don't tell kids never ever go on a sidewalk, right? We develop the structures around them, right? Street signs and stop signs and crosswalks. And importantly, we walk alongside them. as they grow up. We hold their hand and we tell them, stop when you get to that, to that intersection and wait for me to catch up. Like, we walk alongside them and teach them, stop at the stop sign, look both ways before you cross the street, like, until those things become muscle memory. That's what it actually looks like to involve kids in safety, and right, in systems of safety. And it's important that we do, because what would happen if we didn't? I'm kind of going on more of a soapbox than I expected here with our conclusion, Stephanie. But what I want to say, I guess, is that it's not just that you can, right, work in online spaces safely, but also that you should, because young people need these kinds of spaces like ours to help them understand, what does safety look like online? What does it feel like to be part of it? And also, what are the tools and, and practices and, and pieces that if I'm a young person, that I can pick up and carry myself as I venture further into the digital landscape. That's my mic drop conclusion. Anything to add to that, Stephanie, before we come to a close?
I would just say that often I hear from youth serving organizations that the reason they've thought about maybe doing something similar to this, but the reason they haven't is because it's risky. And just like it's risky to walk on the sidewalk, I think that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. And we know that young boys are specifically increasingly living their lives and their interpersonal lives online, and they're getting a lot of connection and belonging out of those relationships that they're building with each other online. But there's often a lot of harm going on as well. And so it's up to us as the caring adults in this space to make sure that we're building spaces that they can continue to build that belonging and connection with one another, where there's those guardrails, those stop signs, and, the crosswalks are present, like, at the end of the day. And so I really just see it as our duty as people who are working with young people to meet them where they are. We all want people in a program to be, there and showing up. And so we know that young boys especially are online and are increasingly not going to in-person programming. So if we're wanting to meet them, how are we building those safeguards? How are we building those guardrails? Because we know that we can't have a youth program without them. It's paramount.
Perfect. It's paramount. You've got this. Thanks for joining us in this learning exercise. You can look forward to further videos. I can't remember if I'm saying this at the end of every video or not, but don't be a stranger. If you have any questions about some of the, the policies or the tools or the Discord features that we talked about in this video, by all means, let us know. That's it from me. Bye for now.